Hello, welcome to Surface Sessions here in a fully sprung Norfolk countryside. In the same week that I was named East Anglia's coolest techie, I get an invitation from Microsoft to a party in New York. For the release of their new Surface 3. The trip gave me the opportunity to meet members of the Surface design team and to reflect on my experience of the Surface Pro 3 over the last 8 months. Is it any good? I don't know, how's it been? Tell us about it. How has it been? Well, I've certainly put it through its paces. I've demonstrated Pro Tools, Cubase, Sonar, Ableton, Reason, other things. I've multi-tracked, I've synthesized, I've orchestrated, I've composed, I've jammed with it, looped with it, I've played live with it, and I've controlled whole vast video arrays with it. I've plugged in audio interfaces, I've plugged in synths, I've plugged in controllers, I've even run it with an iPad. And at no time has the Surface moaned, whinged, complained. In fact, it sort of lapped it up without breaking a sweat. So yeah, I'm pretty happy. Everything I've talked about up to now has been desktop software. Software that's not designed for touch. It's not multi-touch enabled. It's not designed for sort of tablet size use. And yet I found the combination of touch, of the pen, of mouse and keyboard track padding to be an absolute revelation. I've sat with my hand on a mouse for most of my adult life, and to break out of that paradigm is very releasing. My posture, my shoulders, my RSI infested muscles kind of have all breathed a collective sigh of relief and embraced this new way of working. I'm no longer frozen in place. I'm animated. I'm engaged. I'm feeling sort of creative. And when I sit at a regular laptop now, I immediately feel constrained again. If you want to know what sort of drugs Microsoft were on when they dreamt up Windows 8, well, this is it. Yeah, I don't mean to get all sort of gooey about it, but once you start using it day to day, all the Metro apps start making a lot more sense. What initially felt odd and rather sort of empty now feels really clean and focused. In my desktop machine is a cacophony of a gazillion windows open, all vying for attention, all overlapping each other. Whereas my Surface is kind of an oasis of peace, calm and focused tranquility. Is it a bit like an iPad then? Well, I suppose, but without all the sort of the sluggy slowishness and without not having any clue where any of my files are or where they're going to go, and also not being able to run any real professional content creation software. So other than those things, yeah, it's just like an iPad. A lot is made of the difference in numbers of apps available in the Apple and Windows Store. But the one killer app that the Surface has that the iPad doesn't is the freaking desktop. I can run whatever software I like. And when I'm using the digital pen, it means I don't have to worry about a mouse and keyboard. I don't have to interrupt my workflow. I can just get right on with using desktop software, Metro software, Windows apps, whatever downloaded piece of rubbish I want to run. I can do it because it's a flipping PC. And I can use a keyboard and mouse if I want. So where are the holes? Well, the first thing that became glaringly obvious for me is when using the pen is that you need to have some kind of customizable toolbar. When you're working in tablet mode, you've sort of moved into the screen and you're working away and you're kind of involved and engaged in it. The last thing you want to do is kind of pull away to use the keyboard. I mean, you can, of course, you can use the attached keyboard, that's fine. You can use the on-screen keyboard, but that jumps and takes up half the screen and it moves your windows about, and it interrupts that flow as you're trying to engage or do with or connect with whatever it is you're trying to do, whatever it is you're trying to create. And so in order to not interrupt your workflow, what you need is a little sort of toolbar of buttons down one side so that I can press copy, paste, I can press start, stop, record, I can bring up the mixer, I can bring up the project view, I can bring up the synth GUI, all from just a little touch of my thumb, so I'm not having to step away from what I'm doing and use a keyboard shortcut or a mouse, but I can remain in here engaged in what I'm doing, which is where the creative space is, which is where I want to be. I can do this with a cool piece of software called Toolbar Creator, and there's some others out there as well that I need to look into, but I'd really like to see it embedded into the OS. Now, be part of a customizable on-screen keyboard that you can chop and change and move around and do what the heck you like with. The other thing I'd like to see is the swipey word flow thing that I get on my Windows phone. You know, rather than having a full keyboard going across this screen here, which I then have to type with in a touch type kind of way, if I could just have a little one that's in the corner and then I could be going to type, how awesome would that be? I think that's a thumbs up awesomeness. That's almost a double Fonzie of awesomeness that would be. So yeah, Microsoft, do that. Secondly, CPU throttling. Now, I haven't really said any detail about this before because it's a sort of a thorny, tricky, sticky, gluey, jammy sort of issue, which I'm not sure really does anybody any good. But the gist of it is that once you load up the CPU to its sort of maximum, the surface then gets hot and it gets to a point, there's a threshold it will hit where the system has to cool down. And so the fans come on, and then after the little while, the CPU will clock down or gets throttled, if you see what I mean. So the CPU steps down and the system then cools down and recovers, and off you go. Now, if you're a gamer and you're playing some kind of high intensity, graphics intensive game, then what you'll experience is that everything will be running fine, and then suddenly the frame rate will drop and it will start to stutter and the game becomes unplayable. In our world, in the ProAudio world, if you're loading up plugin after plugin after plugin and keep on going, there's going to come a point at which you've loaded it up so much that the heat has risen and the CPU is now starting to step down. And when that happens, you're going to have to unload a whole load of plugins in order for the temperature to drop and the CPU usage to drop so that it can recover and come back up again. With a desktop PC, when you load up loads and loads of plugins, you'll hit a point where the system will start to glitch, and then you just back off one or two plugins and the system is restored to stability again. With the Surface, that's not what happens. You need to unload a whole bunch of plugins in order to get the temperature down so that you can start using the system again. So, you know, that's not an ideal thing. It's not a desktop system. It's a hybrid laptop. I spoke to some of the designers of the Surface about this issue, and basically they said that they designed the Surface to be the best thing that they could within the constraints of the technology, within constraints of the form factor, of the cooling, of the power of the processor, and they did the best job they possibly could. And it's the CPU itself which is designed to throttle when it gets too hot, and so that's just what this sort of processor does. But bear in mind that this is exactly the same processor that's in the MacBook Air, and it encounters exactly the same problems, but people on the Mac just seem to kind of just get on with it. So in this sort of form factor, there's just not the cooling to allow the processor to be completely maxed out. The CPU is excellent at coping with short bursts of power, like if you're using Photoshop and you apply a filter and it goes when it does it really quickly and then comes back to normal usage again. With the sort of things that we do, when you load up racks and racks of plugins, that sort of constant, always on power is really not what this CPU is designed for. I've only ever encountered throttling issues when running performance tests, never when running music software or anything else for that matter. If you're a hardcore gamer, then this is probably not the product for you. But I've played many hours of Minecraft and Total War without any problems whatsoever. So in summary, you can't max out the CPU with plugins, but you can still do a shed load of stuff before you even get anywhere near that threshold. Thirdly, connectivity, that single USB port. It's a bit of a bummer, but you know, with a passive hub, you can run 2 or 3 devices, including like an audio interface, a MIDI keyboard, that kind of thing. And with a powered hub, you can add library drives and dongles and all sorts of stuff. The Surface Dock offers USB 2 ports and USB 3 ports on separate buses, which is awesome. But you do have to dock the Surface at a sort of a fixed angle, which is not actually conducive towards working with it with a pen or anything like that. If they could only produce a little cable that would run from this side port here into the dock that I could then pull away and use this at any angle that I like, that would be an amazing thing. Now the new Surface 3 has a second USB port on the side. It's the charging port, it's a mini USB port, but apparently this can also be used as a USB port on its own, if you so wish. Of course, what we'd like to see on the Surface Pro 4 is Thunderbolt, which would open us up to a whole realm of other devices, including Firewire audio interfaces, which would be pretty cool. Personally, I don't think it's very likely, but you never know. So after 8 months of use, the Surface Pro 3 has been for me an almost perfect music making and creative tool. It's revolutionized my live performance, it's transformed the way I work, and it's liberated me from the desktop, mouse, keyboard paradigm. I still use my desktop for big projects, but increasingly I find myself starting the creative process at the Surface and then also ending it there with the live performance. And on top of that, it's starting to take over my day-to-day operations because it's just so easy to use. The Surface 3, which I have here, is not the same deal. It's an entry-level system with an entry-level spec, but I'm going to be running a whole load of tests on it to see exactly what it can do for music production. Still pretty cool though, and I'll be posting my results in a couple of weeks. So where do we go from here? Well, I'm now going to be turning my attention towards software that's designed for touch, that's designed more for our Surface machines here. Look, I've got two. I have two. See how different sizes they are? Slightly smaller one. Ding, 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 ding. First look, these aren't out until May, so this is a real coup. So yeah, touch design software has been sort of thin on the ground. I mean, we know about Emulator, we know about StageLight. In fact, I've spent the last month writing a review on StageLight while I've been off my feet with a bad back. But they're just about to release an update to the current version, and so I'm kind of holding off until I've had a really good go at that. But that will be coming along really soon. But then, yeah, there's Emulator. There's also a new version of Hollyhock, of Usign Hollyhock. Whatever the heck that is, we still haven't got into it, but that deserves a fair bit of scrutiny, I think. There's Sonar Platinum, of course, which was out before Christmas, but I've written a full review of that for Sound on Sound magazine, which should be out sort of April, May time. So I'm going to wait for that to hit before I do anything further on Sonar. So that's all coming along, but I'll leave you with a look at the very, very beautiful Staff Pad, which perfectly demonstrates why the Surface should be your next mobile music making platform. So am I happy with it overall? Yeah, I'm happy with it. So yeah, I'm doing a lot more stuff. I will see you next time. Come and join us again. Come and visit us if you're after a computer for audio, for desktop or laptop. Come and see me and talk to me if you have questions about using the Surface or what to do. I'm more than happy to talk about it because I really like talking about this stuff. So join us again, visit the website, read all the stuff, follow us on Twitter, come and find us on Facebook, drop around for a cup of tea, whatever you like. See you next time.